This is the Unscripted Podcast. All right. Welcome. November 12th, 2020.
Rocking with the tape on the floor still.
That's right.
Turn our phones off.
This is the Unscripted Podcast, and we are live today. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate everybody. Today we're talking about discipleship.
Yeah, we're going to do a couple chats about discipleship.
Yep. So I'm so glad that you want to follow me.
I am so glad I want to follow you. You know, even in that, there's nothing wrong with it in the sense that, like Paul said, imitate me as
I imitate Christ.
Yeah, so it's okay to imitate Bob when Bob's doing good things.
That's right. Don't follow me when I'm doing something bad. That's what I want for my kids too. It's like, why do you not listen to the good things that I do?
Yeah, why do you pick up my bad habits?
Right.
Like what is your superpower? Why is it that you have to do the bad things?
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you what your bad habits are, but
I almost said it, so I hate the stutter box on it. But that's just the nature of things.
That's right. When you think about it, it's like I can remember we were redoing a chicken house one time for me and buddies of mine. We were doing it, and his dad was working with us, and we were both hitting this board on taking the lower boards off the walls, and it was on one of the metal trusses, and so we were hitting this board back and forth, and I would hit on one side of it, and then my buddy would hit on the other side. Well, as we were hitting, I slammed that thing, and my buddy hit it, and the board came off, and then I was going to hit it, and
get back to your mic.
I guess my reflexes didn't stop. Well, the hammer flew out of my hand and flew over toward Mr. Hank, and Mr. Hank, awesome Christian guy, and anyways, he said a bad word, and so we rode Hank Keith for that for years. We were 13, 14-year-old boys, and
right.
It's like, you remember the one time that you said this bad word, Mr. Hank?
Right.
And so it's like, man, I guess doing all these projects around the house or just leading my kids in general in life, it's like I just trying to always watch what I do because they're watching and, they're going to follow.
Yeah, and isn't that the inherent challenge with anything is because you're thinking like, I'm always teaching. I'm always teaching. And then yet you realize that when you do something bonehead that you shouldn't do, that you were teaching them then too.
Yeah, you're still teaching.
Yeah, and so and you think it's like at work. We used to have this saying that it doesn't matter how many attaboys, they're all a race with one whoopsie.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
So you do, you could. We used to have our error rate. We would make it into a number value where it was the rate of things we'd messed up. And if you look at the millions of man hours we put into versus the rate of time we'd messed up, it was like 0.002 or something. So that means that like 99.98% of the time we hit it flat out of the park. But 0.02% of the time it could have cost us millions.
Yeah, that's right. And, so I'm sitting here putting down flooring in my house. You know that, but so
does half of Facebook when you sing "Oh How I Love Jesus" and
okay, that's right.
Corner bar you do whatever it was.
Yeah, but you think half of Facebook does, but really it's all my stuff's been. It's actually Facebook has toned me back, like as far as my outreach to people. Just so many things have been positive or about helping people or. I'm not trying to toot my horn, but I'm just saying, like, I've noticed that I went from 400-something likes on a thing or the average of 200-something likes down. They've told me back to, like, 70-something people that are doing things. But, so, anyway, I borrowed a table saw from Tom Smithmeyer, and he's like, you can borrow it as long as you keep this guard down. I'm like, yes, sir, Mr. Tom. But as you well as I do, when you're cutting and you're trying to look through plexiglass, there's times whenever you have to put the guard up. And
Tom's saying that because he can only count the 9 3/4.
That's right. He's like, I was being careful too when he
right.
knocked his finger off. But it's when I'm following those, when I'm looking at that board going through, it's like I'm so careful and I'm conscious about it. Well, it's like you talking about I was thinking about that with you, with the guys at the workplace, that everything's good. We're all good and safe until somebody chops a finger off, or until somebody's arm gets stuck in a one of them big machines. And
discipling is that way too, right? And so we're going to do this series about discipling, and what we're talking about is discipline. That's the kind of the root word of discipline, right? Is discipline.
Sure.
And so, Hebrews 12, I think it's verse 13, 11, 15, something like that. Right in the middle of it, the Hebrew writer would say, "No discipline for the present time seems to be good.
Sure.
But rather, in time, it's going to yield the peaceable fruits of righteousness." Well, when we're talking about discipling, we're talking about discipline. So you take these guys. The guys that get hurt doing something, typically speaking, in my experiences, are not the guys that have done something. Not the guys that are doing it the first time. The guys that are doing it the first time, like whatever.
Yeah, they're super cautious.
Yeah, they're scared. You watch your boys, and like I'm trying to get them to, yesterday, Liam got a lizard out of the house and accidentally cut his tail off. He used a cup to pinch him to carry him outside. So I was telling Ryan, get a Kleenex and get that tail up. Well, let's flop it and carry it on. And he's scared to death. It's wiggling. And he's scared to death of this tail just because it's wiggling. There's this little dead tail that's wiggling around, right? Well, that's the way we typically are when it comes to things. And
yeah, so he was being super careful about it.
Yes, exactly. Now, if he'd have done that 1,000 times, he'd have scooped it up and threw it out the door, right?
He wouldn't need to get a napkin.
Right. Well, that's the way it is in our lives with discipline. Is when we start that cut in anything, like you I don't know if you got a skill saw. You ever had a skill saw with a laser on it?
Mm-hmm.
So your skill saw's got this laser, and that laser is an infinite projection because it's light.
Yeah.
Essentially, as long as that the energy is there, that light is going to run forever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but it's the initial cut that determines the direction. So you take that cut, if you're supposed to go one direction, no matter what you think, the further down the pipe it's going to get, the farther off it's going to be.
That's right. And
so the straighter you start that cut, the straighter that line's going to be when you get to the end of it. And so it's the same way with discipline. We got to look. We got to see where we're going to be down the road with regards to where I'm starting my cut right now. And I can't take my eyes off of where I'm heading. And so, as for us as Christians, that's why Jesus uses these kind of analogies, or John would use it with regards to 1 John chapter 1, walking in the light as he is in the light.
Right.
Yeah, and he goes on to use this, look, if you say you have no sin, you're a liar. In him is no darkness. All these kind of analogies that he's trying to use there to get yourself to realize, don't fool yourself. Don't think that you're just Mr. Perfect, but what you are is you're a person that's disciplining. Paul will say it like this: I discipline my body, I buffet my body daily, lest after I preach to others, I myself may become disqualified. And so, if we're going to be disciples, it's going to involve discipline. It's going to involve me making hard decisions.
Absolutely. One thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to look back in time when I'm sitting on my deathbed, or even looking back at my grandkids or whatever. And I'm sure that everybody, hindsight's always 20/20, but I don't want to be the guy who looks back and goes, if I would have just steered it a little bit different, 15 years ago, what kind of outcome it would have been. You talking about that thing with the lasers. I was listening to a podcast and watching a guy who was a Medal of Honor recipient, and he was Mike Chapman, and he talked about back in Vietnam they were trying to infiltrate on a particular river. Well, they're 15 miles out on the ship, and they're azimuthing back then because they didn't have GPS.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, when you azimuth and you're off a degree 15 miles out, he said it took us to a different river channel. And he said, so we're looking at on this mission, this recon mission, we're in a total different river channel, so nothing was the same. And he just talked about how that it changed everything. Instead of messing with guys who were 60 guys, they're messing with 600 now, and roughly. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I don't want to look back in time and go, man, I could have followed a lot better, or look back in time and look at my children, say, if I would have just did this one thing different 15 years ago, look at how much better they would have been. I want to see those things now. And one thing that, you know, I want my kids, I don't want my kids to look back and remember the things that I did wrong or whatever, and I'm sure that they will to an extent because that's our nature, but I just want to point my children, and I want to point others not to follow me, but to follow Christ.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's why it's determining in your heart, purposing, right, that you're going to do. You take somebody that's just newly married. You know, the habits that they form in their marriage in the beginning will dictate how they'll be from then on. You know, I mean, of course, there'll be some evolution to some of those things, but you know, because
it'll set a good standard, though.
Well, you think about this. Whenever you sit down and do marriage counseling, I mean, I've never really, I mean, maybe to some degree, but most people that I've ever had any kind of interaction with counseling has always been to some degree, you know, and I use this term very loosely, a Christian, right? Whether they're in the church or out of the church. And you ask them these questions, and they say, well, I want to put the Lord first.
Yeah. Well, what does that mean?
What does it look like?
Right.
Right. And so, like, I want to put the Lord first. Well, what you know, what is that going to mean to you? So you set these things in your mind, right? Now I'm going to discipline myself that this is what we're going to do. There's going to be certain things that I'm just going to do as a disciple, and that if I form these habits in my mind, so then hopefully my kids will never have the story where they remember Daddy saying a dirty word.
Right. Exactly.
And so I've already determined, I've already disciplined myself to do that. And so, you know, over the next couple weeks, you know, we'll take some time and we'll talk about what discipline means. What does it mean for discipline? Where is the origin of the word? Why is that word, you know, that there's no really usage of the word disciple in the Old Testament.
Okay.
So in the classic sense that we would think about it in the New Testament, you know, because, you know, we think about the disciples, we think about the 12, for example.
Right.
Or we think about, you know, maybe even the inner circle of that, you know, Peter, James, John, those guys. But, you know, there was a lot of people that were disciples. Mary was a disciple. Lazarus was a disciple.
Exactly.
Martha was a disciple. You know, there was certainly 120 left by the time they get to Acts 1, because it's that many people in the upper room, you know, with Peter when they choose Matthias.
Yeah, Matthias, right.
And so, you know, we think about disciples, it's not just a title. It's not just a title. It's an associative term for us as Christians, because we think about the disciples, and it's big T, big D. Mm-hmm. But it's the disciples, the people. And so you remember that term becomes synonymous with Christians. You know, Acts 17, the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch.
Right.
So the people that were disciplined were first called Christians in Antioch. And so, you know, it's not just while it is a title, right, like Christian or daddy or whatever, it's more of a moniker, you know, more of a defining term.
Sure. And I think about the scripture in Proverbs that says, you know, as a man thinketh, so is he. Mm-hmm. And it's so the kind of parameters that I place in my mind about what discipleship is, just like you saying in marriage counseling or whatever it might be, I want to put the Lord first. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, to me, it might mean one thing. To you, it might mean another. And then to somebody else, it might be so far different.
What do you mean by that? Like it's existential? Like we all get to do our own thing?
Well, that's the way that some people could put their mindset about it, is that, well, for me, putting the Lord first might mean, I go back to thinking back in my 20s, and I thought, well, to put the Lord first, that meant I'm going to go to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. That's putting the Lord first. But the more that I think the more that you grow as a Christian, the more that you realize, okay, well, I'm not really being like Christ until I'm living these things out.
Yes, it's and what becomes synonymous sometimes is these terms, like we say in the church. You know, you'll have somebody that's sitting. You've been you've seen people like this that have come to every service for 30 years and they've never obeyed the gospel. Well, they'll say something like, well, old brother Bob or old brother Jim over there, he's been coming all these years. I don't know why he hasn't been baptized. Well, he's not been converted.
Sure.
That's the problem. He's not ready to be a disciple yet. And so just old brother Jim or whoever it is over here being baptized, just getting wet ain't what is going to cut it. Because see, when we make that the defining term of discipleship, well, there's a whole score of people that's going to go to heaven. It's not just that. It's me becoming like my Lord.
Exactly. And so when you look at the definition, you could say disciplined. You also look at disciple. It would be a follower, a learner. It's so many times we think, okay, well, if I spend 30 minutes, if you spend 30 minutes with somebody, let's say you're trying to learn a trade, or let's say you're trying to teach somebody a trade. You're trying to teach somebody to be a great machinist, and they spend 30 minutes with you on a Sunday, 30 minutes with you on a Sunday night, and 30 minutes with you on a Wednesday. Can you teach them some things? Yes, you can teach them some things. Can you make them very proficient? I would dare to say no. Yeah,
it's going to take a very special person, that's already going to have some kind of apt, something special about them innately for them to just take 3 30-minute classes. That's kind of the challenge with any of these, like, we've taken these gun classes and we've done the survival training and stuff like that. And, that's kind of the inherent challenge with any of this stuff like this is just like, okay, 30 minutes or, 3 hours or whatever. And now I'm battlefield trained.
Right.
Until Monday afternoon.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like I'm good for 2 days. Well, that's the inherent challenge with disciple. And that's why you think about it. Jesus really could have came into the world to become the lamb, the sacrifice. He could have given up at any point. Not given up. Maybe that's not the way I should say it. God could have spun the cross into motion at any time.
Mm-hmm.
But he chose to wait from his baptism for 3 years for him to walk with his disciples, that's really the recorded part of Jesus' life that we get.
Right.
And so I think this is the reason why, is that, when the disciples ask him, Lord, are you going to show us God now? And he tells them, like, you've been with me all this time and you still don't get it. And really what he's trying to get them to see, I believe he's trying to get them to see is that if you've seen me, you've seen God. God sent Jesus so we could understand God.
Yeah, and those guys, if you're going to take 12 men essentially and say, we're going to change the world with these 12, they can't just be an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't just say, okay, you guys, you're going to go change the world.
Now go do it. Here's your manual.
Right. No, you're gonna have to follow me.
Yes.
You're gonna have to learn the way that I walk through this. You're gonna have to learn the way that I step through this. And because when you really look at it, Peter denies Christ. We all know this. He denied him 3 times. Jesus says he's going to do it. Well, he's in the courtyard where Jesus is getting tried at the high priest's house. Well, when you fast forward roughly 50 days later, you have Pentecost. Well, Peter stands up and preaches the first sermon. But then when you jump into Acts 3, whenever they're going to the temple, and then Peter and John get arrested because they healed this man outside the temple, later Peter's going to be tried by the same guys who tried Jesus. And we're talking just a couple of months later. So how will he know? Well, he followed Jesus. Did he get it right a couple of months before? No, he got it dead wrong. But that's the beauty of discipleship, is Jesus is not expecting you to be perfect. He's expecting you to follow.
He is exactly right. He's expecting you not to be perfect, but perfectly try.
Sure.
And so that's what you're going to see with those things. And sometimes, I know that you were teaching our teen class last night, or high school class, or whatever we call it. But we're doing this series of Great Church. What does a great church look like?
Yeah, in the auditorium. Yeah.
Yeah, in the auditorium. And last night was about transparency. And the week before that was a great church has great self-examination. the ability to look at ourselves and see where we need to make changes. And then the second, I think the caveat to that is a great church is a transparent one, in the sense that, like, I can be identifiable. When I'm just, I've set myself onto such a pedestal that I'm so perfect and I got it all figured out, all this window dressing. The world looks at that and it's like if somebody came to you and was like, the greatest thing that you can be in the world is a NBA guard, right? The greatest thing you can be. Well, you can look at that and you can think, like, there's just no way. Or a pole vaulter.
Yeah.
Right?
Not us.
Right. Exactly right. And so, like, I always wonder how come that little pole doesn't snap. You see that thing, it bends just about over with. Like, I could see me doing that.
You put me and you on it and that thing will snap.
Yeah, exactly. I end up with like a YouTube video with a shard of it through my shoulder blade, right? But if somebody came to you and was like, the best thing in the world that you could be is a pole vaulter. There's nothing greater. There's a best life you can have. There's no greater reward. There's no better blessing than you can be a pole vaulter. Well, you're just going to walk away from it.
Absolutely.
Because it's just such you look at the how much it takes to go through the process of it and to get there. And, so even in that, like, I saw this historical thing the other day, that the guy that really changed the landscape of pole vaulting, not of high jumping, was the guy. Have you noticed when they run and jump?
Are you looking into doing this?
Yes, exactly. I am. So here we go. Story time. The guy that done the high jump, now when they run and jump, you'll see him jump over it back first, right? The guy that changed the scope
did feet first.
No, until then they did it that way. They jumped over it like you and I would if something was chasing us over a fence.
I'm not going to jump over. We're not going to make it.
Yeah, but if a bull's after you and you're running,
I'd look like Barry Sanders getting across there.
That's exactly right. Well, the guy that changed it was the guy that jumped backwards for whatever reason, because then he could jump backwards and your legs bend a certain way. So you can bend your legs over the pole, because the other way your legs don't bend that way.
And you can get higher.
And you can get higher.
And look at, you can just imagine how many feet higher they're getting now because they changed one thing.
Exactly right. And so, what happens with Christianity is, unfortunately, if we're not people that, discipline. Let's go back to the discipline thing. That means that I've got to make changes in my life. Right? Proverbs 28 and verse 13, I think is what it is, that says, let me read it before I say it and say it wrong. But
do you ever go to turn to a verse like that and it wasn't what it was, and it's like, and you really can't think of where it was?
I did it right this time.
Good. Proverbs 28 what? 13. Go ahead.
He who covers his sin will not prosper, but whoever confesses and forsakes them will have mercy. So, if we're going to be Christians, we got to understand, number one, that as disciples, there needs to be some transparency, right? That we've got to be people that aren't perfect, but are perfectly trying. And so when we're going to follow Jesus, we got to realize is that he came to live a life to show us how we're supposed to be, and to show us God, to show us, because he could have fast forwarded to the process at any point and died, went to the cross and become the Bible speak, the propitiation, the sacrifice,
the mercy seat,
the thing that was needed for us. But that's not what he did. He spent all this time so that we can each look at ourselves and draw ourselves through that mold and become the person discipled, disciplined, the way God would have us to be.
Yeah, I was so blessed last night. You were talking about relating with one another in the church, and so many times in the church, I think that we're not connecting enough with each other, and we're not confessing. There's so much power in what you're talking about. We want to conceal everything and make everybody think that I'm perfect. Well, we're not getting anybody closer to heaven by concealing things that our pride keeps us from helping others who are hurting.
We all set ourselves as pole vaulters.
That's right. And so when you look at you take a 22-year-old today, what he may be struggling with. Well, if I'm not open and willing to share some struggles I had whenever I was 22, I'm not helping him get through to help him learn from my mistakes.
That's right.
And so last night I was so blessed to sit with a brother in the church who had he talked to me about struggles that he once had for years. And you look at him now and I'm not going to say how old he is, but I'll just say that he's on up in his years, but, and I'm not going to use his name, but he just talked to me about how you look at him today and his GPS on Jesus is close. Mm-hmm. But he said, if you had looked at me years ago, he's like, my marriage was in shambles. He talked about addiction to pornography, addiction to alcohol, addiction to gambling, and those type things. And so him talking to me about those things makes me go, okay, now whenever I know of a young man who has those same struggles, guess who I can point them to?
That's right.
I can point them to this brother in the church who's now solid, and he can talk about how the things that how it affected his life, how it affected his marriage, and how that he did things wrong. But then I can also look at in the church and go, well, here's a guy who got it right, during those times. And so there's blessings in both. But I look at James 5, same way that you talked about that verse from Proverbs about concealing those things. Well, James 5, confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. And talking about there's so much power when we actually confess the things that we've done. Now, I'm not talking about saying, okay, here's the old man and I want to keep living like the old man.
That's right.
But it's saying the old man once lived this way and I'm so ashamed of it. But let me tell you about whenever I really started being a true follower of Jesus and whenever I started being disciplined in my life and getting it right. Here's the difference that it made for me.
And that's what you're looking, that's why I'm, there's so many things that you could think about. And we talked about some of this with the Holy Spirit thing with, like 1 Corinthians 13, when Paul talks about, that when that which is perfect to come, what this thing is designed to do. James, just a few chapters back in chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians, before we get off of that, Paul's talking about, though we see now, though just dimly through a glass, we shall see it then face to face. Well, James looks at it and uses it a little bit differently later on. He says, whosoever looks into the perfect law of liberty, right? Mm-hmm. Whosoever looks into the perfect law of liberty continues therein, this man shall be blessed in his deed. For if not, you're just like a man beholding his natural face in a glass, right, and turns away and straightly forgets who he is.
Right.
Why is that the case? What you're doing is this book right here, Hebrews 4 and verse 12, the word of God is sharper than any two-edged sword, and he goes to list all these things that it's able to do. Mm-hmm. Well, what's awesome about it is that, it's trimming away the bad, and it's helping us to become more like Jesus, to helping us become the kind of disciples we need to be. And it's not just about showing up when the doors are open at the church building. Is that part of it? Certainly it is. I mean, that's an awesome spiritual temperature. You can't stand not to be around the church. I mean, I can't remember what it was. Sunday night, we had the thing over here after y'all took the kids to the beach, mm-hmm, and Clint was over here, and the boys, the girls, I think maybe it was the girls that were talking, and Clint was like, "Hey, it's not like you're not going to see each other tomorrow night because we had something Monday. What did we have to do Monday? Something we had to do Monday. It's not like y'all going to see each other."
There was a birthday party Monday.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Tuesday night was the girls' study. Wednesday night church.
And then tonight there's the reveal for Beth and Joey. And then Friday we're doing the thing at y'all's house, right? So Clint was like, well, it's not like you see each other Monday, and then Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then Thursday, and Friday. At least we get a break from you on Saturday. Come on, let's go. And he said that tongue in cheek, of course, but it's just faithfulness to the Lord certainly is tempered by the way that you treat His people, right? The way that you want to be around them, because it shows where your priorities are. And it's because the reason why we want to be around God's people is not because I can be counted among the faithful. It's because I can become more like them. Mm. So I can see my brothers and sisters, and I can look at, like you and I were talking about earlier, with one of the brothers in the church, and one of his great qualities that he has, mm-hmm, before the podcast, and the reason why we get together with the church is to provoke unto love and what?
Good works.
That's right. I provoke you unto love and good works, and you provoke the same thing. Because I have to have good works to provoke you in them, right? And you have to have good works.
That's right.
Because, discipling and provoking one another is not saying, all right, Bob, this is a good thing to do. Now you go do it.
Yeah. No, that's management. That's not leadership.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And Jesus was not a manager. And so many times I think people treat Jesus, or they look at the Bible as going, okay, this is a way to manage my life, but really it should be a way to lead your life. And that's what following Jesus truly is about. And that's what we need in the church. We need people who are not just, that's why we need shepherds.
That's right.
And we need to be around each other so much. And so many times people think, I just didn't get much out of that. Okay, well, if you're at a spiritual level right now to where you're not maybe getting much out of a service, what did you bring to it?
That's right.
What did you bring to the assembly?
You ever wondered what the first, how, people say things like, well, I didn't get anything out of church today. Well, how many Jews, right, do you think they come toting their little lamb up to their sacrifice, their doves or whatever, came up to the priest, dropped them off and walked away and thought, I didn't get anything out of that.
Right. And that's the whole cultural thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, like they're going to bring the lamb sacrifice, whatever the case may be, up to the priest. They're going to watch him go through his, methodology of ritual in their sacrifice and everything like that. And the whole time they're supposed to be thinking, this is how God forgives me. This is how God forgives me. This is why I'm doing this. Not because I'm doing some, ritualistic religious practice, but this is how I take care of my problem that I did, whatever the case may be. And then once a year, the high priest is going to get together and they're going to take one lamb and they're going to watch that one little lamb. They're going to put his hands on it. They're going to transfer. That's going to be the scapegoat. That's the one that's going to trot off into the wilderness. And I wonder what the last one that thought as he watched it walk away. That's the one right there. God's removing my sins from me. He's watching it go away from me now. And what a blessed event that was. And what an awesome thing it is for me to watch that goat walk away and think, God's trying for me to understand. This is what he decided was the way that I could understand. He's going to forgive me. He's going to take my sins away from me. Then we're going to take some blood and we're going to kill this one over here and this one, because while that one goes away, so God can remind me that he's removing them from me. This one, he's got to do it because he's got to remind me that this one's got to pay the price. There's going to have to be something that's going to stand in my stead. And that's what's going to do it right now until when Jesus comes.
That's right. And when we can get the idea beyond just that it's an idea of following Jesus, it's saying, I'm going to follow you, Lord, no matter what, because you were my scapegoat. You were the one that took on my sin. And now I see that the world has sin problem, big time. And it's not that we have a disunity problem or a race problem or all these. It's the fact that sin, that's what's plaguing us. That's what's keeping us out of the gates of heaven. And so I want to follow the one who leads people there. I want to follow the one who makes it available. I want to follow the one who built heaven. And that's what the world needs. But the world and the church needs men and women to not only be following Jesus, but to be making followers.
Amen. And that's your goal, to live your life in such a way. Matthew 5, verse 16, therefore let your light so shine before men. You could write that a lot of different ways. Be such a disciple before men.
Sure.
That they can see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So over the next couple of weeks, time's getting short here. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to dive in and we're going to look at maybe some cultural context, what discipling means. We're going to compare look at some of the disciples that Jesus chose and kind of the life, that they came through and how they came, their evolution of their personalities, so to speak. And then, how do we apply those things to us? So, man, I'm just so glad that I can do this with you, Bob.
Absolutely. We hope that you'll join us. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and you can find us at Kensington West Church of Christ. We hope y'all have a good week. This is the Unscripted Podcast.